ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Greg Alexander, the man of the hour.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for coming. Mostly, I think today we're just going to talk about kind of demystifying the cloud. Just kind of understand what it is and what everybody's talking about and why they're talking about it and why you should know about it. And so I'm not going to get too awful deep, and feel free to ask questions, and we can go as technical or as non-technical as whatever you guys are comfortable with. Anyway, what we're going to talk about was just kind of generally what is the cloud and what is it and what everybody's doing on it. And the things that are most important to understand are there's a public cloud, there's a private cloud, there's a hybrid cloud, which is when you're kind of mixing things together with your internal network. So we'll talk a little bit about the different ones. This particular talk is primarily about Azure, but it's just one of many different cloud opportunities out there. There's a number of public clouds. We have some really good private cloud providers here in St. Louis, and so the cloud technology is what's shared amongst all of them. The different providers have a different spin on it, but and there's different pros and cons to which one you would use, whether you use a private cloud or a public cloud, and that's just kind of one of the things we'll talk a little bit about. So anyway, a data center is just where you have your shared data. It's the part of your system. You have your workstations, and then you have a server. Most of you have a server of some kind at your office. It can be anything from a couple of boxes sitting in a closet to something like this, which would be more common in a mid-sized firm, and then all the way to something like that, which is like a data center. And so there's all kinds of things, but the only thing that's in common is where you have your shared data and your shared resources. The applications, file servers, email, anything that you're sharing amongst a lot of people generally is on a server, and the servers can be in all kinds of different places. We had one client, this was kind of what their server room looked like, except that there was wires dangling all over the place, and it caught fire one day. So not the best model for a data center, but they're, so what is the cloud? Cloud, the way that the cloud's typically used, is just a software-defined data center. Earlier what you saw is hardware. It's different machines, and you would buy a server, you'd stick it on a network somewhere, and then you would access it from your workstation. You could save files to it, you could run your email on it, things like that. Cloud technology is essentially taking all of that and making it virtual, and virtualizing it all by making it software-defined. So instead of having a physical box that has this many processors, this much memory, and so much else, it can be a small part of a much bigger machine, but it appears to you to be exactly what you were looking at. So the benefit of having a software-defined system is it's much more flexible. If I want to add a new server to like that middle data center, that's ours. If I want to add a new server to that, I have to go order it from Dell. It comes in a few weeks later. You have to configure it. I have to take away people that are real expensive and spend all our time to get it all set up. And it's a couple of weeks before it's all said and done, and there's a lot of work to get it done. If I go to a cloud provider, and I can either call them up or email them and say, here, spin this up, or I can go on, and if I've got a control panel, I can just hit a button and make one. And 5 minutes later, I have what I need. So these are my expensive graphics. The thing about cloud, the word cloud comes from this picture. Everybody, if you ever saw any drawings from diagrams, it was just, the internet was this amorphous cloud that was out there. And so they've just kind of said anything that's kind of out there in the world, that's the cloud. So a typical network today, you'd have your company network, you'd have your workstations that would be hanging off of it, and then you'd have a server. And that server might be a file server, an email server, whatever else you might have. And then you'd have a connection to the internet. So if you wanted to get to the internet, you just go across your network and off you go. The challenge is, one of the problems with that is that my little frowny face guy here has got a phone. He wants to get some information off of his workstation. You can do that, but it's a lot more complicated. And because because you have to come in through the internet to here. You have to set up routers and firewalls and everything so you can get back to your workstation and do all that stuff. That's not really where the world's going. You know, we got the cloud model is you take your server off your network and you bring it down into the cloud, and your shared resources are down here in the cloud somewhere. And then you can get to it from anywhere. Anybody, you know, whoever wants to get to it, whoever is allowed to get to it, can get to the data on the server. And these workstations here are no different. So if you're working at home, or if you're at a job site, or whatever you're doing, you have every single bit of access that you have from home, from work. So if you really want to work in a distributed environment, you want to work from home, you pull up your data. It's the exact same thing you have it at your office. And that's really one of the big differences of the cloud, is you're moving your shared resources from, you know, tied into your internal network. You're moving them out to in this environment here. Now, private cloud and public cloud are two different things. The technologies are essentially the same, but these machines out here are either part of a big shared environment or an environment that's more yours. You know, it's a set of your machines that are yours or are more dedicated to you, and it's less of a shared environment, more of a private environment. I won't get too deep into this one, but this is the 4 different types of offerings out there. This is essentially may or may not be obvious. These are all. This is the stack of things that you have to run an application. You have to have hardware, you have to have networks, servers, databases, security, and applications. So typically you would buy all this stuff. You buy a machine, you buy Windows, or you buy Linux, and then you would put it in your data center. You would buy the application, you'd configure it, you'd set it all up, you'd plug it into a network, and do all that work to make it work. And all that's happening whether you're aware of it or not. It's just, that's all out there happening. The different models are something called infrastructure as a service, which is essentially you give up the hardware part of it to the vendor. In the cloud, they have what's effectively a server. And for all intents and purposes, it could be physical, but it's generally a virtual server. And then you bring in the software and the applications and everything else. So these 2 models here, if you're an end user, you can't tell the difference. You have no idea that the server you're talking to is in this room here, or it's in a cloud in Texas. I mean, there is no difference as far as what you're seeing. You log on to a Windows server, it looks exactly the same. The PaaS, which is called Platform as a Service, is where the vendor provides the database software, more of the infrastructure, and this is the least common, just so you know, of all of them right now. It's probably the fastest growing. But Platform as a Service is where the vendor provides everything, and all you have to do is the application, like WordPress, for example, or Great Plains, Dynamics accounting. So all you would do is have the software where you would be managing the software. The vendor provides everything else. So it kind of sits on top of that. And then lastly is SaaS, which is software as a service. TurboTax Online is a SaaS product. You don't do anything, right? You just have an internet connection. You don't have to install, update. You're not worried about, is it the latest version or upgrades or anything. None of that stuff is in your area. It's all managed by the vendor. You just log on to the software and off you go. And so a SaaS platform is you see a lot of these today. This is kind of, see if you have a data center today, this is where most people are doing something in this area. This requires generally custom development. The advantage of PaaS is that it's got some really, really neat features as far as scalability and capacity. We'll talk a little bit about that. The public cloud is, the reason that you're hearing so much about it is because it's growing so fast. Both public and private cloud. You're seeing this massive transition of you know, 10 years ago, every company like ours or yours had data centers internally. It might have been the closet, it might have been something specialized, but that's all. It's the only option you had, because your internet connection was so slow, you really couldn't have done anything else. So you had to have it locally in order to work. But now that the internet connections are so much faster, I mean, we have a gigabit connection here. So with the fiber and the existence of fiber and everything else, the internal network is, our external network to the internet just as fast as our internal network is. So it's just as easy. But you're seeing growth in, and this is across all of them, all the different platforms, is you're seeing this very rapid growth because it's a lot more cost effective. It's just a lot. It's one of those things that once you've kind of gone to it, it's really one of those things where you really won't figure out why you did it any other way. Kind of fits in that category. But right now, Amazon's the biggest one. Microsoft's number 2. IBM is number 3, but they don't really seem to be getting aggressive. Google is really getting aggressive in the public cloud. They're investing. All of these guys are investing billions of dollars a year in this model. I mean, one of these data centers are huge. The one I saw one in Las Vegas. It was 6 football fields big, of nothing but racks and racks of servers. I mean, tens of thousands of servers, and I don't know how much power they use, but it was lots of power. But then they have the but Microsoft's growing the fastest, you know, and Amazon is, but still significantly bigger. And then your private cloud providers are more regional, and they can help you. The difference between public and private cloud to a lot of extent is public cloud is kind of a self-service model for the most part. You know, we're going to do all this and make this all available for you. Go at it, have fun. And like Rick, you have a private cloud on Rackspace, right? And it's pretty easy to use, right? It's not terrible. As long as I say it. You know, it's not terrible, but you can do a lot of things with it. And public cloud is more, you know, they're catering to people, they're catering to really high volumes. You know, they have tens of thousands of customers, and so it's much more a self-service model. Private cloud is more of a regional play, and the companies that are regional, as much as, I mean, they're smaller than these guys, but you also get a lot more hands-on service. Like, you really can't call Microsoft or Amazon unless you pay, I think, $1,200 a month is their support level for calling. And but anyway, but as you can see, this is year-on-year growth. I mean, they're and that's absorbing up all the little data centers in the world. They're all getting sucked up. Yes, ma'am.
Greg, would you explain the difference, if there is one, between having a private connection where all of your data is on a server, even if you're not keeping the infrastructure yourself,
right,
versus public? Or is that what you're saying? Or is that
well, yeah, it is different. In a public cloud, and I hope my guy says right, is these machines, there's a whole lot of machines. It's not one big picture of just that racks and racks of machines. So if you signed up, and that might have been Microsoft or Amazon or any one of them, and if you sign up for it, they're going to give you a little slice of that, some little slice of that, and they're going to use software to make it private, to make it so that only you can get to that little slice, and the network between that little slice and your office network is all encrypted and private and everything else.
hopefully no one else can get it?
Exactly. But I would think, but in a private cloud world, it's more physical. There's a more physical aspect to it. So to where you got that additional kind of control of you're not really in a shared world, you know. But that said, you know, there's an awful lot of security people that are working in both worlds that are doing everything they can to protect your data. So I think security was really a big worry in cloud because the software wasn't mature, and there were some problems. They had some problems where people were able to get into people's stuff, you know, like they shouldn't. But then again, that happens with the other model too. You know, Target has their own data center and they got hacked. So I mean, but they put a ton of money into this thing. In fact, one of the things behind Windows 10 is some of the security issues they learned in cloud. So
It's shocking how secure things are nowadays compared to even 5 years ago.
oh yeah.
I mean,
Wouldn't you suggest that's why Microsoft is growing so swiftly is because of the security aspects? I've found testing them with others, like Google, in the Google contract, it doesn't specifically line item say they will protect your data.
Mhm.
And Microsoft said definitely.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, Microsoft has really made this important. I was at a conference with a CEO of Microsoft, and he said, look, the very first thing he opened with, number one thing, security. You know, and they've made a huge investment. And that, like I said, Windows 10, a big reason for the rewrite for Windows 10 was security. And but in their cloud environment, they take that very seriously. In fact, they're constantly in lawsuits with the U.S. government on access to information outside the U.S. So Microsoft takes security very seriously, as do all the cloud providers. They all know that that's what that trust is what gives them business, right? I mean, in Alex, your guys' area, I mean, if people didn't trust you, Alex works for a private cloud provider, or a hosting company here. If your customers didn't trust you, it'd be bad. It would be bad. So, I mean, it's something all these companies really focus on, is really trying to make sure that you're safe. You know, in my mind, and I think now that the software is much more mature, I feel a lot more comfortable with stuff on the cloud than I do with it here. And the main reason being is there's a whole lot of really expensive network security people working for these cloud people that aren't working for my little data center back here. So the reason that I'm secure in the past was probably because nobody ever wanted to hit me. It wasn't because it wasn't able to. It's probably because, you know, anonymity was more of the defense than anything else. So I think security is an area that's really grown. I mean, even the banks are the last. Banks haven't gone to cloud yet. Just so you know, they're still sticking their toe in the water a little bit. They're not quite there. So, oh yeah, everybody's gonna have to. These people, when Microsoft or Amazon orders servers from Dell, they order them in blocks of 10,000. That's the smallest block they order. So they probably get a little bit better pricing than we do. Okay. So why do you do this? Why do you move here? You know, in some respects, I joke a lot that what we did is the cloud is basically the mainframe. We just waited for all the mainframers to retire so we could charge more for it. But it's a very centralized, all the resources in the world. I mean, up on this cloud is all the resources you can possibly imagine. I mean, we had a project just yesterday where we needed a message bus, which is a way for programs to talk to each other. In the past, that would have been a big hassle, get all the software, get it all set up and configured. I've been weeks to get it all done. This was 2 buttons. I'd click, and it was set up. And all these things are out there. You know, we look at, initially it just replaces your server. Okay, fine. I've got a server in the closet, now I've got a server in the cloud, and you're thinking, okay, well that's cool, you know. But it's so much more than that. That server in the cloud has access, and you have access to essentially an unlimited amount of computing power that's out there, whatever you can imagine. And that's why I think what you're going to see is this explosion of innovation over the next 2 or 3 years as people start to realize that I have more computing power available now than any Fortune 500 company in the world, in the US. I can spin up more stuff than Chase Manhattan, or Chase now, right? So you've got all these tools and all this capability and all this software that's all just at your touch. You know, if you have a reason to use it, it's there. And you don't have to go into technical people. Collaboration and sharing. This goes back to my little picture of the cloud. The fact that everything's in the cloud, you can get to it from anywhere. From your phone, from your tablet. I used the word omni-channel, I didn't explain that. But your software is all going to be omni-channel, which is I can use my software from my phone, my tablet, my desktop, my TV, my car, pretty soon. So that ability to have it where the data is at a place where I can get to it from wherever I am allows me to use all those devices. Like we talk about, we'll show you a little bit about Azure in a little bit, but I use the phone for it. When I want to turn off machines and turn on machines, I just get on my phone and do it. And I mean, one of those people sitting at a stoplight. Anyway, enables rapid development of new products. You have all these tools are available, so you can go use them, and you don't have to. You don't have all these speed bumps as far as trying to get something done. Everything's already there. You've got this huge pile of resources. You just reach in and grab something. Where before you had to go talk to your infrastructure people, your network people, everything else to try to get something done. Security, we already talked a little bit about it. Flexibility, it's all available. No obsolescence. This is another one. I mean, if you buy these machines and 2 or 3 years later they're obsolete, and then you got to go buy new machines, and then you got to go through, and then you bought Windows 7. Well, now do you get server? You got Server 2008, and then all of a sudden you got the next version, and the next version, and the next version, and you're doing all these upgrades, or you're not doing them, and then you run into issues where software doesn't run on the old versions and all this other stuff. In the cloud world, they're often, depending on the agreement you have, they'll do all the patches and updates for you. So it's just always happening. It just happens. And then you don't have to worry about it so much. One of the nice things is you just change servers, and then you can get on different servers. May lower cost, or may not lower cost. One of the gotchas with the cloud is a credit card. I mean, you basically, you can go out there and spend as much as you choose to spend. I told you have all these resources. There's nothing that sits there and says you can't spend. So if you want to spin up a 50 terabyte big data array, sure, 2 buttons, 3 buttons, 5 buttons, whatever. But that might cost you $5,000 a month. And so there's no way to, there's nothing, you have to have controls on what you're doing with this. You can't just open this up and say, hey, everybody, have fun. Because they can spin up a lot of cost with this stuff if they want. So managing it and thinking about it is important also. That's one of the advantages of private cloud, because they do have limitations. They have controls over what you can spend, and you can't just blow the thing out. But we found as a rule that it's been lower. For what we use them for, it's been lower. And this is more of an accounting concept. It's a lease. You're leasing the computers. It's not a capital expense, so it's not CapEx. It's all hourly. So you can, if that's important to your company, that's one of the other aspects. Software as a service. It's just some of the examples of software as a service. Anything where you're using it, QuickBooks Online, right?
Kind of flip to that, and that's what in our industry, people are not wanting to go away from that $15,000, $40,000, $70,000 capital expense. Said, hey, can you make that $50 to $1,100 a month?
Yeah.
And that's what all of those full hosted, cloud-based services, O365, Google Plus,
right.
That is attractive to those people that don't want to cash pour themselves.
Exactly.
They'll pay actually pay cash.
Exactly. Exactly. And then pay that $70,000, then 5 years from now to pay it again, right? We use Office 365 here, which is, we were kind of our guinea pig for that platform, and we moved, and it was a seamless move. It really went well. We moved all of our email. We had our own email servers here and everything. It moved it all up to Office 365. The nice thing about it is every individual gets 5 licenses for Office, for full, at least the one we have. And so you can go home, put it on your desktop, put it on your phone, put it on your tablet, on your workshop, and they all share the same data. You got this OneDrive thing, which is a cloud store, so it all sticks it up there. So it's a nice thing. So anyway, but software as a service again is a really fast growing area. Still, it's been going for a while. Platform as a service, it's a little different. Like I said, you can spin up, you can go in the cloud, you can spin up websites, databases are all there. The biggest thing I think to talk about, this is a little more in depth on this one, but the biggest thing to understand about platform as a service is they scale better than anything. Platform as a service, you can spin up a website and like say we had a customer who had these events every year. They'd have an event and they would market the crap out of it, and their website would go from 1,000 hits a day to 100,000 hits a day, right? So in the prior world, what did you do? You had to buy a machine that would handle 100,000 hits a day. So they'd go out and so that was the problem, because then you didn't need it 51 weeks of the year. You didn't need that. So the clouds, some of the cloud offerings have the ability to auto scale, and PaaS is one of them, where I can build a website and then I can tell it that every time the CPU gets 60% busy, add another machine. So it would just continue to add more machines. So it could spin up 10 machines running that, and I don't pay for them unless I'm using them. So I could also say anytime the CPU goes below 20%, shut one of them off. So it expands automatically, and comes back automatically. And the difference with PaaS is mostly the database has that ability also. So the database can also spin. So you can throw 1,000 processors at a job and have it automatically run up to 1,000 processors and then scale back down to 2. There's all kinds of fun stuff going on with scaling. I'll talk about that in a little bit too. Offsite backup, it's a really cool thing. I mean, there's a lot of companies that do that, and they what? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've heard two different ways where I think I've got it where I pay a fee for a server, processor, and it's the same fee no matter how much it's used.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, I think maybe Azure's different, where you only pay for the data that's being transmitted. Is that true?
So,
No.
meaning, so some people use it for DR, like we have a fire department that doesn't need to get that data all the time. It's like accident reports, but by compliance laws, they have to be able to get to those if they're needed. So for 7 years, they have to keep those accident reports, so they put them up and they're back up in Azure. And then there's a small subscription fee for that, but then if they need to pull that down, then there would be a bigger fee to pull those reports.
Right, but they're not really paying for the machines while they're doing it.
Right.
They're just paying for space.
That's something, maybe that's the data, the big store of data.
Right.
You go grab it.
Yeah. There's all kinds of. There's a lot of. One of the most confusing things is right now, is there's so many options. I mean, if we talk to the different companies here in St. Louis, there's a couple of them here, and we talk to Azure, we talk to Amazon, we talk to Google. It's really there's a million different things that they have today, and some of it's free, some of it's really expensive, and it charges a lot. As a rule, with the machines, if you're using like a machine, they charge you if it's on or not, whether you're using it or not. And so it's more charge based if it's on, or they charge how much disk space you use, or they charge for how much network you use. So they kind of count everything. The bills are this long, they can be they get really long. And I've had the problem with the getting used too much. Just so you know, that was a mistake I made. Infrastructure as a service. This is basically the thing that it looks exactly like what you have today. It replaces. You take your server that's sitting in a room back here, and you spin one up in the cloud, and it all looks the same. And there's a private network between you and that server. It all pretty much looks the same. It's just physically somewhere else. What's really cool is this one. We use this a lot. If you guys do any software development, is you can. We have a project. We need a server. In the old days, big hassle. New days, click a button, turn it on. But you're paying for it, and you're thinking, well, I don't need it all the time. So you turn it off when you're not using it. We have ours, so they only run 12 hours a day. They run from 6 to 6. All of our test and dev servers, 5 days a week. So you think about it, you're paying, everything in the cloud is paid by hour or minute or clock. So if you run 12 to 12, 5 days a week, you run 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, 60 hours, right? what is there, 100, how many hours in a week? 164, something like that. 184. Anyway, so you're only using it 1/3 of the time. So if a server costs $100 a month, but you're only using it 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, which is all you really needed anyway, you're paying 1/3 of that. So we can have test servers and dev servers that cost us $40 a month, $30 a month, something like that. And it can be whatever operating system I want it to be. I can have, and I'll show you a little bit of this just so you can see how it works. But I can have any Linux, almost any Linux version, Windows 8, 2008, 2012, 2016. You know, so whatever version of whatever I need. We have a customer that was, they wanted to upgrade to a new operating system, but they wanted to make sure that the software would work on the new operating system. So old days, hassle, new days, spin up one in the new operating system, load it up, fire it up, see if it works. You know, 4 hours later, tear the whole thing down, and you're done. So I paid for 4 hours of, I think, 74 cents an hour, and I was done. So that goes to flexibility. What else can you do? And this is really where I was talking about where it's going, is machine learning is an interesting thing. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. The old days, the hurdle for you starting any kind of machine learning experiment is really high because most of it's on Linux. You'd have to learn, you know, getting all that machine set up and everything else. I was able to run a machine learning exercise with several million rows of data for a customer in 8 hours. And that included start to finish. They gave me 1 million rows of data. I could load it into, and they've got a machine learning platform. It's out on Azure. Google has one, you know, they all have one. Load 1 million rows into it, run the analytics jobs. Didn't like the results first one, try another one, try another one. Anybody here could have done it. It's no different than using Excel. And it comes out with this nice result, and I could come back and say, okay, and I send them the model, and they're really happy. And I paid for whatever, I don't know how, I haven't seen a bill on that one yet, but it was whatever I needed for 3 machines for 8 hours. And so maybe $40, I don't know. They're creating these APIs out there, basically services that you can call. And they're available to you because you're in the cloud. You're in this mainframe world. So if there's an API out there that Google has. An API just means a programming interface. I can have a program that calls it. There's one out there that Google has that recognizes images and can tell you what it's a picture of. So it's really cool. You can send it a picture and it tells you this is what it is. So I think, I blanked on their name again. Do you remember the name of that company, the stock photo people? Getty. Getty is a company that has stock photos. You know, photographers load up images, and if you want one for your website, you get it and you pay them some kind of fee, right? Well, the problem with that is when you uploaded a picture, Getty didn't know what it was. So somebody had to go look and maybe type in, this is the picture of the Taj Mahal, right? And they moved over to this particular API on Google, which Google looks at the picture and tells them what it is. And so they've automated that job out of recognizing what the picture is. They can say, this is a picture, and it's really, really good. I mean, it can tell you skylines. You know, this is Denver, this is, you know, everything else. They've got real-time translation, where you can actually feed it a stream of, in a conference, a video conference, right? We can be talking English, they can be talking in Spanish, and you can actually real-time translate, where it'll translate in real time. Not perfect, kind of like your Google Translate, you know, but a whole lot better than zero, right? Voice recognition, you can feed it a recording, and it'll return a transcript, right? And this is kind of what I was going at about what's happening is all these powers are out there. These huge companies are spending millions of dollars writing this piece of software and letting you rent it for 10 cents an hour. You know, so as people start, and this is what I talk about, the innovation that's going to happen, is you start seeing all these out there, and you can have it's very simple to write to. People can very easily integrate this kind of horsepower into any kind of application you can imagine that fits in your niche, in your little world.
One of the customers KPIs are critical for them to accomplish what they need to do daily. So that's why Office 365 is great.
Oh yeah. So there's all these tools are all out there, and they're making it available to you to use. You can test different platforms. I talked about that a little bit already. Big data, again, big data, 10 or 12, 13 terabytes is small in a big data world. A lot of times, if you're really doing a big data analysis, you're up at 100 terabytes, up into the petabytes. If I were to, if some customer were to come in and say, hey, I want you to do a big data exercise for me, a few years ago, that would have been a big deal. Because I would, spinning up all the equipment. I mean, the minimum is like 5 machines, and then realistically, you're probably more like 8. And so I'd have to get 8 machines, get them all bought and built, and put them all together and get all of it configured. Weeks of work. And today, click, 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 and off I go. And so, like I said, IoT. The thing with IoT is it's Internet of Things, right? That's all like your watch and your the sensors on your car and all the other different things. The problem with them is they're constantly sending data to the internet. Where are you going to put it all, and what are you going to do with it? And so you need these kind of tools. And lastly, this one's kind of fun. I didn't really think about it. They're making all these data sets available. Now, so they charge for them, don't get me wrong. They're not free. But if you want a service that validates every single address in the U.S., it's out there. All these different things for you to do and you to get to. We're playing with one now. Every from the Social Security Administration, they have a list of every person that's ever gotten a Social Security number since 1879. So it's not their Social Security numbers, don't worry about that. But it's their names, It's their names and where they were and all this stuff like that. So we were going to put together something that said, okay, what's the most common name for this county for the last 100 years, and how does it vary? And being able to put, it was just going to be a fun thing to put a little website up where people could type in, names and see, and also add other things like what's the most common name for murderers? What's the most common name for, all this kind of stuff would be fun. I mean, you could go look in and see, how does your name rank? Because you're letting your name, you're naming a baby. You might want to say, oh, don't want to use that one. So anyway, it was just, that's one of the things you can do with big data is you can start to take these massive amounts of information, process them, and make them to where you can make some things out, work out of them. And again, this goes back to where I'm talking about the innovation. That might be that. Okay, we'll make this thing available if you want it. And then this last page was there's a big page in Microsoft about all the trust stuff, and it really applies to all of them. There's not a whole lot of difference. I mean, all of them have their own little flavor of this thing, the private clouds, the public clouds, but this is just the one that talks a lot about security, HIPAA compliance, and all the different kinds of compliance. There's a little calculator. It's really nice where you can go and say, okay, this is how much these things cost, so you can figure it out, because it's always hard to figure out when it's price per hour. Everything's at 0.23 cents per hour. And so this thing kind of maps it out for you and gives you an idea what you're spending. They have a free month trial, so you can sign up and you can do whatever you want for a month for free. And
you get $200.
It's what?
For spend. You can actually you also get $200.
You get $200 of credit to spend on it, right?
You can spend on it.
Right. And then here's a little WordPress site I spun up just for
If
fun.
you're a startup, a lot of times Microsoft does like little programs that will actually give you a year's worth for free.
Yeah, I've heard that. There's there's something they call a race to the bottom. But right now, Google and Amazon and Microsoft are all fighting for share because they all realize that once you get on their platform, you're probably not going to leave. Once you lock that customer down, and they're not going to leave because it's a hassle. It's a major hassle to move, and so they're buying customers now right and left. I mean, for us, they gave us our first year free. Like you said, just say here, and then gave us a bunch of comp money to market it. And
when we don't use it, they bug us and they're like, hey, no, try this out. I'll give you another year free.
I know. Exactly. They're trying to buy the business. And so there's been 37 price cuts in Amazon in the last 2 years. I mean, they're trying to, they keep lowering the price so they want to buy the business so they can have, because they know you're not going to leave. It's unlikely you'll leave. And they're not doing a bad job. I mean, these guys, all these companies that do this, all the bad ones, they've died off. I mean, there were a lot of really crappy hosting companies 5-10 years ago, and they're gone. I mean, the ones that had one single line to the internet, and that line got cut, and then they're going, oh, we don't know what happened. So anyway, so the companies that are out there are all substantial, they're all real, and they're all very qualified at what they're doing. So just real quick here, this is that pricing calculator I was telling you about. It's on the web. It's a link to it. Just look up Azure pricing, and it'll break it out, and you can put in how many hours you're going to use something. It tells you how much it is. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you just a little bit. This is Azure. This is what when you log on, this is what you get. And you have all these are all the virtual machines. These would be the equivalent of a server. And I've got one here that it tells me what it is. This one's got it's a two core, two processors. It has 7 gig of memory, and there's the IP address and everything else. The thing that I like is if I decide I don't like that I need something bigger or smaller, I just pick one. And let's say I want a smaller one. I'm just going to drop it down to something because I don't need much. And I can say that, and then it changes it.
It's dynamic.
It's dynamic.
Nice.
It all just changes all what it was. And all the data that was there is still there. All the programs are there, still there. And it just gives you the way. And so now I've changed my cost. I've changed what I can do and everything else. And that's about how long it takes to change the size of my server. And literally. I mean, it'll take about 3 or 4 minutes to finish. And then it's done. And then I have a different size server. So that's if I want to add memory, if I want to add, disk space, it's the same basic thing. If I want to add another couple terabytes of disk space, it's essentially the same type thing. I go to a menu, I pull it down, I say add this, and off it goes. But this is the whole interface of Azure, and they come in, and it's very simple. They actually have there's so many different options here that you have to kind of pick the options that you want, because there's like 50 different ones, big data and all the different types of things. It just basically moves a lot of the technology away from infrastructure and network people to where it's more controlled through something like this, or a control panel. So one last couple little trivias. I saw something that projected the other day. They're expecting to see 1 million job losses overseas for people who would manage data centers, because a lot of the management of data centers was done overseas because the time frame, right? They're at night, and but they're expecting to see over 1 million job losses over the next 3 years because of less people needed to manage data centers, like in ours. We would have somebody manage ours at night, and those things are all going. So this thing is, the cloud is really expanding, and it's going to affect competitiveness in different companies, the way that the flexibility, how quickly they move, and how quickly they can change and adapt. So anyway, that's the cloud.
It's a great question.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Let's go right in.
Oh, please.
So at the same time, is this not making or improving the opportunities or growth and development overseas, or?
Oh, absolutely. It's putting all this power in the hands of everybody. And I mean, it's just, you talk about this democratization of computing, is literally we have a Fortune 500 data center available at our fingertips, just like a guy does in the poorest country in the world. If they have an internet connection, they have this capability to do these things. So there's that expansion. I talked about speed bumps and walls that prevented people from making that capital investment. A small company in a third world country wouldn't have had the capability, and they had the greatest ideas in the world. They couldn't do anything with it.
Give you an example of that. My company is a Korean company, and we are working with artificial intelligence to read like text and automate market research and stuff like that.
That's all
Because of this.
Well, that's why I was wondering, should there still be an explosion?
Oh,
So they're
absolutely.
losing jobs in one section.
Well, they're losing in jobs in one area, but they're
Being offset.
oh, absolutely. I think more than offset.
Yeah.
I think more than offset. But I'm just saying, this is a game changer, and it's affecting. It's gonna shuffle the deck with people and jobs and everything over the whole planet, because these data centers. This I happen to use. One of the things I didn't show you is you pick which data center you want. They're all over the world. I mean, if I want to run a website out of Australia, I just pick Australia, and or Asia, or Europe, or anything else. So if I want my data to be closer to my customer, and I have customers in Asia, I can run my system out of Asia.
And you have it in multiple spots, so if they're closer to Asia,
Oh, yeah.
they'll do this one, or they're in the US, it's always fast.
Exactly. Yeah, you can have it in both. And one last thing I wanted to mention. Every single thing that's written to a disk in a cloud is written 3 times. All right? So the concept of backup is totally different in this world. If I write a file to the cloud, it's written to 3 different places on 3 different machines. So there is no need, you never have to worry about hardware failure or anything like that going to cost you to lose data. The only reason you do backups anymore is because if I do something stupid, it's going to replicate that 3 times. If I delete a file, it'll delete it 3 times. Or if I update a file, a database update where I put in a bad update, it's going to replicate that 3 times. So anyway, you really got to look at that.
Is that Azure specific, or is that,
It's Azure. I know for sure it's Azure, Google, and Amazon. I don't know about. I think it'd be
IBM does
specific
it.
to others. I'm no doubt IBM does it. I'm sure most of them do. Huh.
So from a consumer standpoint, I deal with a lot of podcasters, videographers, stuff like that, where they're uploading video. And some of it's great to put on YouTube when you want it public, but when you want it private, for like a private course or something like that,
Right.
they're using Wistia and their costs are just skyrocketing because they're uploading so many videos and limited. Do you find that Azure is easier to use than Amazon? Because Amazon can also get out of control when you're using video.
No, I wish I could say Azure was somehow better than Amazon, but no. I think every problem that Amazon has, Azure has. The only advantage Microsoft has is if you already have a Microsoft network, they have the hybrid thing where it's easy to plug them together. So your security works between both of them. So if you have rights on your local network, you have rights on your virtual network. So Microsoft is really good on the hybrid cloud stuff, but the
interface looks a little bit more intuitive than AWS.
yeah. Just so you know, we got a couple of guys here who really like Google better. So,
A question I wanted to ask is, talking about the cloud, how do you think that benefits from a marketing standpoint, like file sharing, media, on the go?
well, yeah. I mean, again, I think there's going to be whole different business models built off this. Everything's available all the time, and there isn't that limitation. And you can be more tablet based. You can have all this data that's available, basically unlimited. Disk space is really cheap in the cloud world. You were asking about uploading videos and pods stuff. Disk space is really cheap, but just managing it all can get pricey. Any questions? Done?
The caveat is if you have an internet connection.
Yes.
Speak to a minute as to the
Good question. That's a good point.
Sustainability of the internet. Who's trying to improve, securitize, make the internet more robust? Where are we with that?
That guy should get a prize.
I know, right?
This whole-
That is the big thing with the whole cloud-based stuff, is no internet connection, no cloud, right? I don't know that. Internet out to the home and internet to businesses is variable. The quality and the reliability is variable. I was on a committee in Wildwood for 5 years trying to get internet out to Wildwood, and yeah, it just so we're if you've got really good connections like fiber and stuff like that, and coax and DSL, I mean, it's all 95%, right? I mean, it's going to work 95% of the time, and 5% of the time, if your whole business is in the cloud, 5% of the time your whole business is going to be off. So that's something to worry about. But then if And the negatives of the cloud are that the internet connectivity. You saw it earlier, right? Slow connections, poor connections, stuff like that. But the other thing is, you think about the other way. If your data center's here, your folks might have connection to your shared data, but nobody else will. You know, your customers may not. If you run your website from here, and you've got your connection to the internet's down, then your customers can't get to your website.
In the real world, too, some of the most like pressing things for having your stuff in the cloud is your files. You know, if you're uploading all of your files to your cloud server, but most of these cloud platforms for their file server stuff downloads it also to your local computers and things like that. So even if you do lose internet connection, you're not going to lose access to all of your important documents and things that you might need.
Right, like if we're doing Excel and stuff, it'll keep it. It can replicate it to your local. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what I know how we operate is we try to have, there's 3 locations for files that, it's your local, essentially your server, and then a cloud base. So any one of those gets lost, which you're, obviously with no internet connection, your cloud service is out.
Right.
So you still have a, replicated version in your server and on your possible workstation device. So it's, you're replicating that more than just one time somewhere.
Right.
And, and actually to get back to the internet connection, the way that the servers or the services in St. Louis are working minus fiber is they're all called best efforts. So you get your 100 meg from Charter. They're saying we're going to work as hard as we can to give you 100. But really, there's multiple solutions for that. Obviously, fiber being number one, because if your Charter or your AT&T goes down, your regular, what would be typical broadband connection, you're out. And when you call them and say, hey, I was out for 3 hours, but you owe me 3 hours of service, they're going to tell you to jump right. Fiber, on the other hand, they guarantee service. So if you're out for 3 hours, you get bonus back that money that you would have spent those 3 hours. Now, that doesn't count any sales dollars you might have lost or anything like that, but the service time gets rebated back. Now, the solution for the one or the other in the broadband world, like the coax or the DSL world, would be use both of them. There's
Redundant systems.
4, 5, 6, even LTE wireless service, and it turns that into your signal. So if your Charter falls off, well, you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 other services you can use. Granted, there's cost involved in that. But if you lost the deal, whether it's a $14 screw or a $400,000 something, you didn't lose it. You still had connectivity. People can still get to your websites. People can still get to your services.
I think that's going to be part of what you end up doing. I mean, there's also level of service, quality of service agreements with like Southwestern Bell. If you get a business service, you can call them at Sunday at 1 o'clock in the morning, they'll be out. We had a T1 to our house, which is that level, and I've called them Sunday morning, they come out. And so it's just a function of how much money you want to spend if you want to have redundant links and stuff like that. But you can always, again, your phone's probably going to work. And if everything you need is on the internet, you can get on your phone and you can do everything you do there. And that's the difference, is when the stuff's not working, there's something that's going to be working. The cloud's always going to be up. Now, just one last thing on the backup. Everything's written 3 times. They also have an option called global, which writes it 3 times in one data center and 3 times in another data center. So if for some reason that entire data center were to get destroyed, your stuff would still be available somewhere else. So it's really just a function of money now, of how much safety do you want? If I want to store the thing 40 times in 40 different data centers all over the world, sure, they'll do that.
I don't know if this is a real thing or not, but I was told the story that someone couldn't even break into one of those data centers and go into one of the servers and put a thumb drive in and get data, because those bits of data are broken out through multiple data centers as well. So it's not like they capture your data just on one server in their center.
They're spread across all kinds of stuff.
So the complexity of getting those bits and bytes back together to get to, I don't know, your financial statements would probably be feasible without a lot of
And there's a lot of physical security. These data centers are not I mean, I've been to a couple different data centers. These are very secure complexes. You got to have biometric stuff and everything else. So it's not like ours used to be in a closet up there. You know, we had a key lock door, right? I mean, but I mean, some of these guys got armed guards, and you got biometric stuff, and you got to do all this stuff to get in the door. So physically, they're much more secure than anything that you're going to be able to do. I mean, it's just the way it is. This is their business. And so it's just, and again, that's kind of why this thing's all moving in this direction, is because it's just a lot safer place to put your stuff, and it's got a lot of advantages. And yes, sir.
I think one of the providers was exploring putting them at the bottom of the ocean to keep them cool.
Yeah, Microsoft's doing that. Yep.
You know, I mean, the one in Vegas, it had to be really hot when you walked into the room, no? Or massive air conditioners.
Lots of air conditioners, but they also got lots of electricity, right? They're right near the dam. So they use one rack. The one in Vegas, that was one called. They had one rack that used a megawatt of power at one rack, but it also had. It was a one that did work for PayPal, and they had 72 petabytes, which if you think about that, 72,000 terabytes of disk, and but they're running a job that's all the things that happen on PayPal and eBay, and they wanted to be able to figure out, when you look at something on eBay, what else should I show you that makes you more likely to buy? And that was 72 petabyte data array that they used under a big data application, and the rack used a megawatt of power. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and there's all these tools. The most amazing thing of it all is all these tools are now available to you. I mean, if you can imagine it, before you can imagine all you want, it wouldn't have mattered, right? There's no way you could buy $1 million worth of hardware to do anything about it. And today, you can go rent $1 million worth of hardware. And if you've got a good reason to do it, it's worth the money, right? So that's the difference. Yes, sir.
Well, I hear that Hillary has some extra space. She wipes hers with a cloth.
Yes, I'm sure she's got a lot more extra space now, huh? All right. Anything else? Can I help? We got time to go, huh? All right.
Quick question, how does it change the knowledge of the people that are doing the work? Like, when you're talking about the cloud, is it, you look at it more strategically, or do you think about your business in a larger scope because more things can be maybe moved to the cloud, or how does it change maybe the people that?
Well, I think that's where I think this next 3 or 4 years we're going to see this just explosion of innovation, because there are no restrictions. There's no limitations. All the limitations that we all have blinders on, right? We all work within the context of what we understand, and the more you open that up, and the more you allow yourself to think about, hey, I can do voice recognition, I can do all this stuff, and you start allowing all those things in, the blinders open up a bit. And so I think it allows you to look at your business differently, less geographically constrained possibly, less, capital constrained. And so I think there's just going to be a massive change. I think there's going to be this whole level of innovation of what's going on. You're seeing so much happening in Africa and Europe right now, in Asia. These data centers are there. I mean, they're doing all the same things we're doing here. So our advantage is different now. We used to have this big advantage because all the stuff was here, but it's not here anymore. It's all everywhere, and so there's no real competitive advantage to being here anymore. So there's going to be just a lot of innovation coming out, and that's what we got to do. We got to keep up.
I found too that developers go further because they don't have to worry about your basics. I mean, it's kind of like in the math world. What did the calculator do? You know, it allowed you to stop having to worry about adding and subtracting and start really getting into it.
And you're not wasting the time either. You're not doing the mundane stuff. All the mundane stuff is gone.
Yeah.
You know, it's click of a couple buttons, and Caleb is one of our developers, and he was, all these tools are all out there. It's all tightly integrated now. You just instead of having to spend a lot of time messing with all this stuff or waiting for infrastructure people to get something done, it just, you just do it yourself and it's gone. And you move on. So, like I said, it's a different thing. A lot of things changing. It's all yours.
This magical interaction just
But thank
go
you.
on all day, and we love it. So thank you guys. Thanks, Greg. Let's give it up. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.